in the post before, I wanted to go live, and this is going to be the way in which we close um, the Living Room podcast for this season, and we're going to take a little break just for a few weeks. We're going to release a special episode in the middle of that break that is with my children, and it was really fun to sit down and have conversations with my children, especially considering that everything that has been happening for the last month um, has affected them too, and it has affected the way in which people have talked about my parenting and the kind of mother that I am, and CPS reports and all the thing. So we're gonna release that in the middle of the break, and then we'll come back with season two. And for season two, we already have four episodes recorded. They are already recorded. We've been editing them, and then I already have Niche scheduled, and I have Letty scheduled for a historian, a Black historian, and she's incredible. And I have Matthew, an adoptee who wrote "You Can't Touch the Sun, You Cannot Touch the Sun." So and Matthias Roberts too, and I'm really excited to share all of those episodes with you all. But this is the way that we wanted to close every season, with a Q&R, with kind of spending time with the community. And so that's what we're going to do. And before I open up to have um, any Q&R, I wanted to talk about the events of the last month and how they have affected me. Not because I want to center my story, but because white rage and Christian violence are such a common occurrence in honestly in the world, and they have been such a common occurrence in the world forever, that I think that it is worth talking about it, because we tend to minimize the ways in which white violence and Christian violence continue to be perpetuated, and we wait until it becomes deadly. We wait until the violence becomes deadly to be able to pay some attention to that violence. And because we wait until the violence becomes deadly, we actually don't care for victims of violence really well. So I'll recap the events, and then I'll talk about the things that I've learned and the things that I want to talk about. But basically, it all started with a tweet. And you've all read the tweet. I have it still on my Twitter account, and I have it on my Instagram account. And the tweet said something to the extent of, I would rather get an abortion than have my brown child adopted by white evangelicals. And I said that that was an act of love. And it is an act of love, because white evangelicals are very, very likely to subject any brown and black child, and any child of the global majority, to a lot of racism, to a lot of different personal and kind of systemic oppression. If my child were to be gay or queer in any way, white evangelicals would probably subject my child to homophobia, to transphobia, to queerphobia in general. And because white evangelicals are so close off to the idea that systemic oppression does exist, they would not consider the ways in which my children would be systemically oppressed. And instead, they would subject them to be absolutely, what's the word that I'm looking for? They would subject them to be completely immersed into whiteness and to be assimilated into whiteness, which is a type of one cultural genocide and cultural abuse, and it's also a type of personal and individual abuse. And I don't want my children subjected to that. It's really not that difficult, and that's a personal choice. I get to make that personal choice. I live in the state of California, in the United States of America, where abortion also happens to be legal. So not a word of what I said is wrong or harms anybody. It's a hypothetical situation. If I were to get pregnant and the only two options that I have are to get an abortion or to have the child be adopted into a white evangelical home, I would choose an abortion. And that is my choice. And I get to choose that. And to this day, people are still asking me to apologize for the tweet, and I won't. I won't apologize for the tweet. I have nothing to apologize for. I actually stand by the tweet more and more as this has developed. After I tweeted that, I genuinely was hoping to have a conversation about adoption and to have a conversation about the uh, the racial implications of adopting children transracially and adopting children transnationally too, and how these harms these children in very serious ways, and the trauma of adoptees. And I was doing that because I was going to have a conversation with my friend June, who was going to come onto the podcast. I have also invited Matthew, and I have also invited other adoptees in, so that we can have conversations about adoption, and we can have conversations about how hard adoption is for adoptees. who are the most marginalized people group when we're talking about adoption. They are the most marginalized people group when we're talking about adoption are not the adopted parents. They are the ones that have the most power, and they are certainly not the agencies that people use. And the biological families are also marginalized in many, many ways. But at the end of the day, the most marginalized continue to be adoptees. And I was hoping to have that conversation and to start and spark conversations like I often do on social media, where we can start listening and learning, basically confronting our own biases, confronting the ways in which we've been told stories. And I recorded a podcast with Patty Krewak, and just brilliant, like absolute brilliance and incredible. And I cannot wait to share that with you in season two. But Patty and I were talking about unforgetting, and it is also something that I talked about. I was preaching this last weekend at a church. And I talked about unforgetting. And this idea of unforgetting comes from Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. And it's this thought that the opposite of truth is not a lie. The opposite of truth is forgetting. And when we forget, we have a lie. And so it's so important to tell history in the right way, to hear history from so many perspectives, from the perspectives of the most marginalized, because we tend to forget the stories of those whose voices are never centered, whose voices are intentionally silenced. And so I try to center the voices of people that are the most marginalized amongst us. And I was trying to do that. But instead, this tweet became what I like to call now a witch hunt. They started retweeting it. A lot of very large evangelical accounts started retweeting it, misinterpreting everything that I was saying. Some people started saying that I wanted to kill black babies, that I wanted to kill brown babies, that I wanted to kill brown babies. Some of these misrepresentations of the tweet ended up in places like 4chan and ended up in different like white supremacist sites. And I started getting a lot of threats. I started getting a lot of like violence online. I was on the board of my children's school, and I was on the board of my children's school because I was voted in by the parents. I was chosen by the parents to be on the board of this school, and because of this, I got a phone call, and it said it was on a Sunday night. I got a phone call, and I had already gotten a couple of threats with my children in them. Like the threats were targeted toward my children. And I was already crying. I was already having a panic attack. And I got a phone call, and it said the the safety of the school is now compromised, and we think that it's best if you resign. And I said, yeah, I understand that. Okay. And I wrote my resignation letter, which is also public. I shared that publicly on my social media. I shared my resignation letter where I was very clear. I shared everything and why I had to resign and all of the things. When the resignation was brought onto the board, a couple of members did not accept the resignation, but at the end of the day, it was voted on and they accepted the resignation, and I am not a part of the board anymore. After that, the school also held a meeting with all of the parents because a lot of white evangelical parents were really upset still and they wanted me gone. And they held a meeting. At the meeting, a lot of things were said that were incredibly harmful, that made me cry. That they were saying that it was fine, that if I weren't at the school, all of their children would be fine, that they would be more likely to die of lightning than of anything else. And this was on the like right after the shooting in Texas, like right after the shooting in Texas. And their main concern was like, well, it's more likely that they'll die of lightning. And I said, no, actually, we're getting death threats from white supremacists. That's only true for white kids, but not for kids of color. Kids of color are more likely to die getting shot or getting arrested or all of these other things. And the main cause of death for children in the United States is actually guns now. So I was really upset at that meeting and I started screaming and I said, you guys don't care about my children. And I was talking to the white parents, the white evangelical parents in that room. And I said, you don't care about my children. And it's not like I'm going to be able to find a school in the United States where they care about them, anyways. And I left the room angry. And I lost an earring, which is really upsetting to me because I really like those earrings, but that's my vanity. And my husband stayed behind. He also screamed at them, and we both left. And the school called me. The school officials called me afterwards, and they apologized. They talked to me. I've been talking to them. I am a part of something that is called the Equity Task Force, which I actually begun. with a black mother and a black father. And the three of us began this. And now evangelical parents have officially asked that I be removed from that task force, which means I cannot volunteer at my kids' school. I am the only person in the whole of the United States that has been asked to be removed from a school board for her opinion that is not harmful. And there are entire board members that have been left. They have experienced no accountability, nothing, and they have said racist things. I have videos of board meetings where they have said things like, this is just the Chinese virus, which is a racist statement that puts Asian Americans and Asian people in general at harm. And they are still sitting on those boards. And I gave my opinion on what I would do on a hypothetical situation. And I was asked to resign. And then there was an entire group of people that are demanding that I am removed. There is a Facebook group for the parents of the school. I was removed from the group immediately. I'm still a parent. This is a public school, and I was removed without any nothing. I wasn't told why. I wasn't nothing. I was just removed. They apologized for that later too, and then they added me again, and I didn't accept because I like to be in places where I am wanted, not where I am tolerated. And it has been awful to get all of these things. My kids couldn't go to school for about a week. Um, then we had to call SDPD. We had to file reports with SDPD. SDPD was posting cars close to the school, and they were doing more rounds around the school so that the kids could be safe. And I was having nightmares. I couldn't sleep. I've lost a lot of weight, and it doesn't sound like a lot of weight because I am not that big, but I've lost around 10 pounds, which doesn't feel like a lot, but I am a small person already. Losing 10 pounds is a lot. When you are this small, it's not okay, especially in such a small amount of time. I've been having panic attacks. I had to talk to my psychiatrist again. I was given other type of medication. I already take Zoloft, and I was given other type of medication in order to be able to sleep some. It's been an absolute nightmare over my opinion. I just shared my opinion. And this is the way that this country treats women of color that decide that they are not going to just shrink for white white Christians and for white Christian, mobs really. Because I was told, just delete the tweet, just apologize, just, forget that everything happened, like just pretend it didn't happen. And I am tired of having to shrink for the comfort of white evangelicals, of white Christians. I'm tired of having to shrink my opinion for Christians to be able to feel comfortable in the ways in which they harm people. Imagine if I would have deleted the tweet. Imagine if I would have apologized. At the end of the day, who am I not standing with? Adoptees. Because the overwhelming majority of adoptees thanked me for saying what I said. They thanked me for standing with them, for listening to what they've been screaming for a very long time. And I will not turn my back on adoptees just because these people have an inability to listen to opinions that just put a mirror in their face and tell them you are actually causing harm. Out of all of the people that saw my tweet, all of the people that retweeted my tweet, and honestly, the ratio on my tweet is terrible. Like I was retweeted so many times. It's really bad, but I will not back down because I am tired of being demanded to back down on my opinion, or of being demanded to shrink because white evangelicals don't like what I have to say. We get to exist too. And I have a right to say the things that I want to say so long as I'm not harming anybody. And saying that I would not give my children, hypothetical children, mind you, that I would not give my hypothetical children to white evangelical families for adoption is not harming white evangelicals. That's my choice. I get to make that choice. I get to say that. I didn't harm anybody. In the meantime, white evangelicals often harm queer people, women, Muslims, Jewish people, atheists, and nobody holds them accountable. I know we all know of the amount of times that white evangelicals have tried to stop adoptions for queer people, and that actively harms queer people. It does. And nobody cares, and nobody stops them, and nobody is asking them to resign from boards that they are on. Nobody is asking them to do anything. There are job opportunities that were canceled for me. People that wanted to work with me that then said, we don't want to work with you anymore because this is just too messy for us. So my opinion is too messy. And there were job opportunities that were gone. I reached out to different news places, including local news places like the San Diego Union Tribune and different other news places here in San Diego, because it is news that a woman of color was pushed out of a board of a public school. And yet, nobody's talking about it. Nobody wants to cover the news because everybody seems to be afraid of white evangelicals and white evangelical pushback and what I call, not just me, but what is called white rage. White rage is what happens when white people or people of the majority, people that are privileged, start losing power, and they notice that they start losing power. And so they come back with so much violence and so much vitriol that they say, we will not allow for you to take more space. It's not okay. Go back to your place. And that is exactly what has been happening here. And I am not the only one. We know the stories of rabbis that said things online too against Christians, holding them accountable, not against them, but said, hey, we don't appreciate when you do these. It's not cool. You're being violent. And these rabbis have been canceled, their jobs lost, book deals canceled. They have now been dealing with a lot of health issues, just like me. And still, white evangelicals will not be held accountable. And I'm not going to shrink. I am going to take a break from the podcast, from all of these. I've been taking a break. I'm going to go to Colombia with my children and we're going to rest. And I'm coming back and I'm not going to stop, because we are not going to have liberation until we understand that it is not appropriate to silence people who have valid opinions just because we feel uncomfortable with the opinion. And I shared something yesterday online, no, like 2 days ago online, and it went a little viral. And I said that we have to choose every organization, and I was saying that because I need the school to think through that, and I need the parents at the school to think through that, because the parents of the school have been having a really hard time with my opinion, and they have no hard time with a lot of people in the school that are full on Trump supporters, that are full on, that have a lot of racist opinions, that have anti-Semitic opinions, that have anti-indigenous opinions. They have no issue with any of them. But me saying that I would rather get an abortion than give my children up for adoption to white evangelicals, that's a problem. And so I tweeted out and I said, we all have to choose, individuals, institutions, families, we all have to choose. Are we going to center the comfort of privileged people? Are we going to center the comfort of privileged people, or are we going to center the safety of marginalized people? Because those two things cannot coexist. The safety of marginalized people will always make the privileged uncomfortable. And that discomfort is something that the privileged should be able to sit with. But instead, we tend to say, you know what, we're going to center the comfort of the privileged, even if it means the safety of the marginalized amongst us is jeopardized. And I honestly don't understand how it is acceptable for us as a society to be more concerned with the comfort of the privileged than the safety of human beings, the safety of people who are marginalized already, the safety of people who already don't find safety in a lot of the spaces and places of this country. And yet we continue to center white evangelicals, we continue to center white Christians, and we will not see liberation, and we will not see better communities, and we will not see a better society if the comfort of the most privileged amongst us is exactly what we continue to center. It is the safety of the marginalized what I am most concerned with. And I had made that decision. I made that decision years ago. And in my spaces and in my world and through my voice, you will always see the most marginalized centered. Their safety is centered. And it's more important to me that marginalized people be centered in my spaces than privileged people be comfortable. And if you are uncomfortable in my spaces, perhaps you should sit with why, instead of come at me and say, hey, you should make me more comfortable. I don't like what you're saying. I want you to make me comfortable, because I don't have to center your comfort. I instead have to create more spaces for the safety of marginalized people to be a reality in more places than just one. Because as I've shared before, and I want to share again, without safety, we actually don't have healing, because our nervous system can only do one or two things: keep us alive or heal us. They cannot do the same thing. They cannot do both things at the same time. It cannot. You can study this. It's just neuroscience. Your sympathetic nervous system, which is the nervous system that is the fight flight response, when it is activated, you cannot heal. Your body is not healing. Imagine that you heal your body as you're running away from a lion trying to eat you. You can't. You don't even feel pain in those moments because your adrenaline is completely shot. You're just trying to survive. And it isn't until we find enough spaces of safety and our parasympathetic nervous system is activated that we actually start to heal. And that is the importance of creating more safe spaces for marginalized people. Because without safe spaces for marginalized people, healing is actually impossible. And without healing, we're going to continue to have people who are reacting and responding and unable to have healthy relationships with others, having to cope, having to use coping mechanisms that can be, maladaptive to them. And instead, we could create a lot of safety so that healing is actually accessible for marginalized people. But we are so concerned with the comfort of the privilege that we continue to jeopardize the nervous system, the well being, the psychological, emotional, and physical well being of marginalized people so that white evangelicals can be like, oh, thank you for centering my comfort. They should be uncomfortable. White evangelicals, white Christians in the United States should be uncomfortable, actually all over the world. They should be uncomfortable. They should be sitting with the reality of the history of violence and genocide and horrible harm that they have subjected queer people and women and Muslim people and Jewish people, children. They should be uncomfortable. But they continue to say, you know what, we live in a fallen world and let's move on. And they continue to say, we just ask, like, you forgive because God forgave. And that is not forgiveness, that is manipulation. That's what it is. And they kept calling me bitter. And they kept saying, oh, you're just bitter. Just forgive. That's not the point. How can you forgive something that people have not actually apologized for and that continues to happen? White evangelicals continue to cause harm and continue to be violent toward different people groups, including me personally in the last month and for a very long time. But they are like, just forgive. You cannot forgive behavior that has not stopped because that is saying, I accept you gaslighting me. I accept you mistreating me. I accept you the ways in which you have chosen to show up in our relationship that are not good or healthy for me. And I will not tolerate that or accept that. So, no, I don't forgive white evangelicals because they have not actually apologized, because apologies actually require changed behavior. And there is no changed behavior from Christian violence for the last 1700 years. Christian violence has not stopped, and lack of accountability for Christians has not stopped in the last 1700 years. Otherwise, ask all of the victims of sexual abuse inside of the Catholic Church, inside of the SBC, and inside of pretty much any other denomination of Christianity. Don't ask us to move on when you still have not apologized and you still continue to cause harm to many different people groups. Ask queer people, ask Jewish people, ask Muslim people. So the it's not just a tweet. It's not just that they were retweeting me. It's that this had repercussions in my life. It had repercussions for my children. I have to move. When I come back from Colombia, I'm going to move. Those are real and I don't have the money to do that. I don't have the finances to do that, and I've had to figure it out. And they don't care, right? Because it doesn't affect them. I have to move. I may have to change my children from that school to a different school, and they don't care. And that affects my children's well-being too, uprooting them. This is the only school they've known. It's a school where I have actually given of myself, volunteer my time. My husband has volunteered his time. We have met people. We have created relationships. We have been there for over 5 years. And we might have to just uproot my children and uproot ourselves just because white evangelicals cannot handle my opinion. That is violence. And it has repercussions in my life, repercussions that I'm living, that my body's living today, trauma that I'm living today. I literally, Andre Henry said something the other day and it was so good, and I'm going to butcher it, but he said, I just wanted to see us free. And instead I have PTSD. And I think he should put that in a song, but I think he will put that in a song. But I am dealing with PTSD symptoms here. Like I opened social media a couple of weeks ago to share a joke that I made with my children. And then I got one comment saying like, oh, that joke is inappropriate, which I still disagree. And I don't think it was. And I immediately had to delete it and be like, I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't. Over a joke. Over a joke. This is not normal. It's not normal that I can't sleep. It's not normal that I'm nauseous all the time. It's not normal that I'm dealing with panic attacks. It's not normal that I'm concerned for my children's well being. It's not normal that I have to go all the way to Colombia so that I can heal, because I don't think I can heal in this country right now, because it makes me nervous to go everywhere. This is not, we deserve better, you know? We all deserve better. Um, we deserve a country where we can share our opinions, even if it makes other people uncomfortable, and we can have a conversation about it. Somebody asked me yesterday, they said, why don't you just apologize? I mean, you hurt people with your tweet. And I said, did I hurt people with my tweet, or were they uncomfortable? Can you help me understand who I hurt? And they didn't answer. And I said, I think that we are just so used to women of color bending and women of color moving and women of color saying, like, yeah, whatever you want, that when a woman of color refuses to back down on her opinion that is valid and non harmful, we think that that's harm. We confuse that for harm. Our biases confuse that for harm. I didn't do anything that harmed anybody. Nobody was harmed by my opinion. I didn't even get an abortion. It was a hypothetical, a hypothetical. That's all. And it is inappropriate to demand that I apologize instead of demanding people respect my opinion. They said, "What would you rather have done?" And I said, I would have rather they ask me, "What do you mean by this?" I would have loved that. I would have loved. There was one Christian, one white Christian, who has adopted two black children, and he said, "Would you come on my podcast? I want to understand." Absolutely. I never say no to those invitations. Absolutely. And I came and we had a conversation. And afterwards, he said, "Thank you. You actually helped me understand a lot." And this is a white evangelical who has actively silenced the voices of many adoptees on TikTok and on Instagram and on Twitter, and has blocked them. And he said, I've messed up. I have to learn a lot more." So imagine if every time we are uncomfortable with an opinion, if every time we are uncomfortable with something, we said, we actually want to understand. And we said, "Can you help me understand? Because I'm not grasping what you're getting at. Why would a woman of color say, I don't want my children around white evangelicals?" And this goes to that representative whose name I cannot remember, and she said that it is grooming to take children to drag shows, or to take them to drag reading hour, which I've taken my children to, and it's really fun. No, it isn't. There has been no zero. There is no evidence and no reports of children being abused by drag queens anywhere. And yet there is hundreds and hundreds and thousands at this point of reports of children being abused inside of churches. So this is all a matter of biases, right? A matter of not wanting to sit down with the biases that we have, this belief that Christian spaces are good spaces, when in reality, they are incredibly harmful and people are abused inside of them, both physically, sexually, emotionally, psychologically, religiously, culturally. But they don't want kids to go to a drag queen reading hour where they are literally just reading stories, age appropriate stories, by a drag queen who is so fun. Their makeup is fun. My children find drag queen reading hours so fun because the makeup is so fun and the outfits are so fun and they love it. And people have no issue with me taking them to churches where we actually know that the pastors are abusers, but they have an issue with me taking them to drag queen hour, because we have societal biases that marginalize people further into marginalization and protect the privileged more and more and more every single day. There is no accountability. The SBC already told us that they were more interested in protecting these pastors that are going to go and share the gospel all over the world instead of protecting the people that have been abused by them. The SBC told us with 700 reports of abuse. They told us that. And is something going to be done? Nope. So, no, I won't stop, and I'll take a break, and I'll care for my well being, and I'll set up different things, and I'm going to have different boundaries for my social media accounts that I'm going to bring when I come back from my break. But we have to learn to respect other people's opinions that are non-harmful. We have to learn in our privilege to sit down with the discomfort that the marginalized are bringing to us. And I've had to do that. Marginalized people have brought mirrors into me and said, "Hey, you're hurting me this way," and I've responded with, thank you for sharing with me. Thank you. I'll change. I'll adjust. I'll adapt. We learned from Lizzo just today. One song, I don't know how much money it costed Lizzo to re-release that song and to re-record that song over one word. But that's the right thing to do. And Lisa could have just as easily said, you know what, I'm a Black woman and I get to do whatever I want because I am the most marginalized in this society, which is true. And yet she chose to be accountable because she understands her privilege in spite of her marginalization. And white evangelicals who have way more privilege cannot do that. In fact, they were criticizing Lisa because she, I quote, she let white people, which is not true. There are Black disabled people too. She let white people bully her into re releasing her song. Did anybody get harmed by the re release of her song? Nope. Nobody. Literally, nobody's harmed by the re release of the song. But did disabled people feel like they were hurt? Yes. And that matters a lot more. So, what kind of a society do we want? And the kind of a society that we want has to come with the actions that we take to get there. And the actions that we take includes being an accountable people, actually listening to marginalized people, actually caring for what they have to say. And so that's kind of what I wanted to share with you all, and the things that I've been learning and the things that I've been navigating and dealing with, and the reason why I have been pretty much silent on all social media platforms. And I will continue to be silent or very, very sporadic for a little bit longer, and then I'll come back. Um, But now I'll open it up to questions. I do let you know right now from the get go, I will not answer questions that are harmful. I will not answer questions that are antagonistic. I will not answer questions that are um, in bad faith. And we can all tell what those are. But I'm happy to answer any questions that are, you know, that are relevant and good. Um, so I'll start with this one. Um, how can we as your community support you? Thank you for asking that. I think that we like the support I have gotten has been incredible already. Just people checking on me, people sending me food, people sending me flowers, just so much kindness. But the biggest support for me is speak up. Speak up in your communities. Speak up. I mean, to the extent that you're safe, please. You know, your safety is more important. But to the extent that you're safe, especially in your privilege, speak up at workplaces. Speak up at your, if you're a parent, teachers have to deal with a lot of these, a lot. And the reason why a lot of the teachers in my kids' school adored me is because I was fighting for them too. And the reason I was fighting for them is because I learned to listen to teachers. And I follow people like Teach and Transform, Liz Kleinrock, and I listen to people like Brit Hawthorne, and I listen to different teachers all over social media who have been saying it's really hard to be a teacher committed to anti racism and anti bias education because most of the education in the United States is biased, and it's really hard to fight against the system as a teacher. And so I said, well, I'll join you. I'll fight with you as a parent. So if you're a parent, join the teachers that are already doing the fight. Ask your administrators, what are you doing to ensure that teachers of color, parents of color, students of color are protected here, that are safe here? If you work at a place where there are a lot of different people of color and there are different marginalized identities, speak up. If you are able-bodied and you see that your workplace, that your neighborhood, that whatever it is doesn't have accessibility for disabilities, then speak up, say something so that marginalized people don't have to. If you see queer phobia, if you see anti-Semitism, if you see anything, just say, I will not tolerate this, not on my watch, I will not stand by it, and just speak up. And listen, probabilities of you getting pushback are very high, including from the communities that you're speaking with, including the communities that are marginalized, because they don't owe us the benefit of the doubt, and they will be perhaps misunderstanding your intentions. And explain your intentions. Don't be fragile. Don't let your defensiveness get the best of you. Don't let your exceptionalism and say, I'm one of the good ones. Why would you treat me this way? I want to, yeah, you are. And yet they don't owe you the benefit of the doubt. Keep fighting. Because if you're only fighting when they applaud for you, you're not really fighting. You're wanting a cookie. And that's something I've had to learn, because it hurts. It hurts when I am fighting against racism and I'm fighting against all of these things. And then people of color come for me. It hurts. It hurts a lot more than when white people come for me. And yet I extend the reality that I am not owed the benefit of the doubt by Black people or Indigenous people or Asian people or really anybody. I'm not owed the benefit of the doubt. So I continue to show up. I continue to explain. I continue to have conversations over DMs. I continue to have conversations over text messages. I continue to say, I hear you. You don't owe me the benefit of the doubt, but I want a better world for all of us. Um, Let me see if there are other questions. Yeah, there is also this idea that you're helping marginalized people. If you think you're helping marginalized people, you're not understanding this, because our oppression is connected together and most all of us are oppressed in some way. You're not helping, you're joining the forces so that we can have a better society, so that we can have a better world. So you're not helping people, you are um, co-conspiring with people. You're joining us so that we can have a better world for everybody. Because so long as one of us is oppressed, all of us are feeling that oppression. We are interconnected. And so there is no, oh, I'm helping the oppressed. So I send $20 to someone that is having a hard time. No. And the $20 are accepted and appreciated. But what I'm saying is it's not a help. It's you are partnering with people that are marginalized in ways that you are not marginalized, so that we can have a society where marginalization and oppression can be abolished. That's what we're doing. And that's a different framework, because I'm not helping anybody, I'm not saving anybody. I don't want my saviorism to get the best of me. Instead, I want to check my saviorism and say, I'm not helping anybody. If I don't move a finger, the work will still be done because people are doing it. I just want to be a part of it. I just want to be a part of the work. And so that's a little different. Um, Via Instagram, can you point us to any adoptees on the subject? Yes, I can. In fact, if you go to my podcast with June A, we June A was so generous and she shared a lot of different resources, including adoptees on Instagram and books like The Child Catchers, and there were other many incredible books. There's also a thread on Twitter that I had, and I can retweet it after these, where I share where I ask people to give us resources too. But yeah, if you go there on the show notes, you can see a lot of different resources, including resources of Instagram pages of adoptees that are sharing a lot of incredible things. Teach and Transform, who is a teacher, and she's also adopted, and she talks about adoption some. She's also Jewish, so she has a lot of different intersections of marginalization. Jewish, adopted, interracially, and internationally adopted. So I like listening to Teach and Transform, Liz Kleinrock, and her book is incredible. And then there is June, of course. There is Matthew, who wrote You Cannot Stop the Sun, just incredible poetry about the experience of being a Black adopted person in the United States. And there are so many others that I like right now. I can't, the Empress Han. Then there is the ex adoptee James. There are so many adoptees that have been screaming about all of these things that have been. There are adoptees that have closed their Instagram accounts because of the harassment and abuse that they have received from adopted parents. So they need our support. They need us to come in numbers and say, we're here, we see you, we support you. And every time adopted parents start just demanding that they are only grateful, we can say, no, they don't have to be only grateful. Adoption comes with trauma, and that's valid. And we can validate that and make room for that. Am I coming out with a book soon? I am. I am currently writing a book, and all of this has obviously delayed a little bit of my writing process. I am supposed to be down with 5 chapters, and I have so far written only 3. So when in Colombia, I'm going to be able to catch up a little bit. But yes, I'm writing a book. The book is going to be called Predatory God. And it's a book about how theology has been used as a weapon of oppression and continues to be used as a weapon of oppression, and how there are all of these theologies that have been used to groom people into accepting and tolerating abuse as something that God wants us to accept and tolerate. And I'm really excited about the book because it not only talks about how we have been groomed to accept and tolerate oppression through religion, specifically Christian religion, but also it talks about how we can find liberation in theology too. And there is liberatory theologies that if we want to, we can partner to. But if theology is just something that you absolutely want to get rid of, the book is also going to make clear that that's absolutely fair and fine. And the thing is that even if you have left Christianity, there is still so much residue because Christian hegemony is goes beyond Christian spaces. Christian hegemony is the reality that we live in the West right now, and the ideas that we have about marriage, the ideas that we have about punitive justice, the ideas that we have about body image, the ideas that we have about gender and sexuality are all coming from Christian hegemony, and we have to dismantle all of that from within us. Christian hegemony is really how all of these ideas of supremacy, different types of supremacy, including white supremacy, have taken such root in our culture. And the reason why we have to start doing the work of uprooting all of those things from within us so that we can have a healthier relationship with ourselves and a healthier relationship with our communities. So yeah, I'm really excited about the book. How many people have apologized for their initial backlash toward you? Does that ever happen? Not to one. And no, that very, very rarely happens. There's actually one instance I said something, and one instance, and a black woman misunderstood what I was saying. And she was so mad at me. And I explained it to her. I said, "Oh, I think that you misread what I was saying." And I explained it to her. And she said, "You're absolutely right. I misread what you were saying. I'm so sorry. I got activated by this one word. I'm really sorry." And I was like, "It's okay. It happens to all of us, of course. Like you see a brown woman saying something about black people and you get activated. I totally get it. No big deal." She's the only one. The only one. It's wild, but she's the only one. Do you think the dominant narrative around adoption will change in the foreseeable future? I hope so. I hope that the narrative will change. The dominant narrative will change. I'm going to say something that is echoing the words of adoptees. This is not my opinion. These are not my ideas. This is echoing the voices of adoptees, but transnational adoption and a lot of transracial adoption, but transnational adoption, especially private adoption, is human trafficking. It is. It's human trafficking. And until we can make peace with that reality, and until we can accept that reality, that paying money to get a child from people who don't have the means to be able to care for that child, lacks consent, is coercive, is harmful, and it is human trafficking. And so I am hoping that as a society, we can have those conversations and start dealing with how can we support these families so that they can keep their children, because that's the only appropriate course of action. There is a reason why Ethiopia closed adoptions. And if you know anything about Ethiopian adoptions, they were closed. The country entirely closed adoptions, international adoptions. And there are children here in the United States that have died, Ethiopian children that have died at the hands of their white evangelical parents because of physical abuse. Um, so it's inappropriate, it's wrong, it's abusive, it's harmful, it's human trafficking. So yeah, I'm hoping that adoption changes. That doesn't mean that all adoption is bad. There is kin adoption that is very necessary when parents are not available, and then there are other ways of allowing for adoptions to happen when children have no other resource. But there is a lot that the system has to grapple with in order to be able to not be non-harmful, including foster care in the United States and adoption from the foster care system. There is a lot of harm there, and most of the children that end up in the foster care system are black and brown, a lot of indigenous children, and the adopted parents are often, and the foster parents are often white because of financial privilege. And we have to be able to talk about all of those intersections if we want to talk about wanting to do better. Do we want these black and brown families and indigenous families and Asian families to keep their children, or do we want to continue to remove them without giving them access to different basic needs and traumatize all of these children? We could do better. It just requires a rehaul of the entire system. And it requires for all of us to grapple with the realities that white supremacy is embedded in all of these systems that we have created. And so white supremacy includes classism, white supremacy includes racism, it includes homophobia, it includes transphobia. And so we have to talk about all of those things. The amount of queer couples that have lost their children, the amount of trans people that have lost their children, all of those are important conversations that we have to have. The amount of indigenous people whose children have been taken by force, the amount of immigrant people whose children have been taken by force, all of those are conversations that we absolutely have to have. Are you continuing to receive security threats? Some, not as much, thankfully. And I was able to because of the incredible team that I have next to me and because of incredible friends that are just so good to me, we were able to block most of the people that were sending the threats. And I'm talking about hundreds of accounts um, blocked on all social media platforms. So yeah, a lot of the threats are gone. I'm still getting some, but not as bad, and all very manageable, very mild. All of them are being turned into the FBI and SDPD. Not that anything can be done about them because most of them are by a lot of anonymous accounts. But if I have record that they are there, if something happens to me, then you know, there can be proceedings, and hopefully it's used. A friend asked me, she said, what do you want me to do? How can I support you? And I said, if something happens to me, can you make sure that it's not in vain, that at least we pass some sort of law that online, this type of online harassment. And I was quoted saying, I want to kill black white babies, Joe Lumen, with quotes, with air quotes. That should be illegal, and it is. It's libel, right? It's not appropriate. But I now have to find a lawyer and find means, like financial means, to be able to pursue all of these lawsuits against Matt Walsh and against all of these people that decided to lie about what I had said. And obviously, the marginalized often don't have the resources to be able to do that. And yet, I'm going to find a way. I just need to rest. And as soon as I rest, I'll come back swinging, because it is absolutely not okay that this happens over and over and over and over again to marginalized people. We say something, and then privileged people get really angry, and we end up taking the entire brunt of that. And then privileged people keep moving in the world like nothing happened while we are dealing with the repercussions of all of that. And I want to set a precedent that that is not tolerated. They lied about me. And because of their lies, I was affected emotionally. I had financial repercussions for all of that, and psychologically. So yeah, I'm hoping that I'm able to do that. Um, I don't know if we have any more questions. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and for listening to all of these. It is really important for us to continue to think about all of these things and to continue to consider ways in which we can meet other people and we can meet the marginalized in better ways. And I know that when we see these things happen, when we see book deals be canceled, when we because of opinions, not because of harm, because see, that's another thing. I was complaining about a book deal from a friend of mine, Rabbi Mike Harvey, being canceled because white evangelicals got mad at him. And people said, but didn't you do the same thing to Jen Buck? Jen Buck wrote a book that was called that was called, what was it? Bougie, no, Trap. It was about trap theology. Jen Buck is a white woman who should not be speaking for black people. Her entire book was about trap theology, which is black theology, is black feminist theology. And Jen Buck is a white woman. And when I asked her, why did you write this book? She said, oh, I studied a lot of black people. Nope. You don't get to write a book about black people and black theology in a white body. And so and I never asked for the book to be canceled, but her publisher, after hearing from a lot of different people that were talking about this, her publisher decided to cancel the book. The reason why Rabbi Mike Harvey's book was canceled was because white evangelicals didn't like what he had to say, not because he was embodying something that is not his identities. His book was literally geared toward Christians from the perspective of a Jewish person. It was like what Jewish people would love for Christians to know. That's a book that we actually need in the world. And it was canceled. I just got the email last week saying that my money is going to be returned because I had already pre ordered. That's tragic. That's censorship. That is censorship. But Jen Book not having her book out doesn't really harm anybody, because Black women and Black theologians have been speaking about all of the things that she's been speaking, but from an actual informed perspective, not just because of cognitive knowledge, not just because they are actual scholars and theologians, but also because they have the embodied experience of being Black people. So that's completely different. Because, yeah, people were saying you're being hypocritical. Like, why is it okay to cancel Jen Buck's book, but not Rabbi Mike's? Because one book is harmful and the other one is not. How can we support Rabbi Mike? Rabbi Mike is currently dealing with a lot of health issues. Um, he also asked that we don't call him Rabbi anymore for now. So Mike Harvey is currently dealing with a lot of health issues. He also ended up getting COVID because he had already an immunocompromised system. And I will send him later DoorDash credits. So if you want to send Rabbi Mike DoorDash credits, you can do so by reaching out to him over social medias, or you can send it to me and I can send it to him. I asked him what he needed, and he said DoorDash credits would be helpful for him. What methods are better if speaking out is not? Speaking out is usually a good method, but often what I suggest people do is in your context, within your context, and considering the ways in which you can feel safe, ask the marginalized people in your communities, ask marginalized people in your immediate spaces, ask marginalized people, how can I support you? How can I be here with you? What can I do? If you see something in workplaces, schools, in the mall, at Target, wherever, if you see something, say something. Just say like, "This is. I'm not going to tolerate this. It's not okay." I shared this story when I was on my podcast with Camille, but I want to share it again. I won't share the whole story. If you want to hear the whole story, listen to the podcast with Camille. But a woman came up to me at Target because I told my son like, "Jesus, Max," and I was saying that because he was being intentionally like he was repeating himself over and over. And I was like, I already said nobody and say, Jesus, Max. And this woman said, don't say that. That's a bad word. And I was like, no, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm not going to let you do that. I'm just not going to let you do that. So I made a fool of myself. I was very loud and I was like, I'm going to keep saying Jesus. And she's like, no, shut up. Stop saying that. And I was like, no, I'm going to scream Jesus then. And I screamed. I screamed Jesus in the middle of Target. And I looked like a crazy person screaming Jesus in the middle of Target. But this woman now knows that she should not approach a woman of color that is talking to her kids in Spanish to tell her that she should not say something. It's none of her business. She should not be saying that. And unless I'm harming my children, which I'm not, she should not get involved. She should just not get involved. I told my son Jesus, like, that's it. So things like that, don't like, so long as you feel safe, take up space. And the thing is, the more space that I take and the more that I speak up, the more that my nervous system is like, you're safe, you're fine. But if you don't even try, then your nervous system is not going to be rewired to know that you can actually do it. You're going to be fine. Especially the more privileged that you are, the more fine that you're going to be. And I have a lot of privilege in the reality that I don't have a proper job that I could be fired from, and that was intentional because I knew that if I had a proper job, they would silence me and they would fire me, and I would be so concerned for my job that I would not be able to say what I have to say. So there's privilege in that too. Um, but in your privilege, speak up. In your privilege, take the risk. Even when you're afraid, take the risk. Maintain your safety, but take a risk. Take a risk, and then your brain will start to rewire and recognize that you can actually do that. You can actually stand up. You can actually stand alongside the marginalized and fight alongside the marginalized and protect the marginalized so that they don't have to be the ones that are always bringing issues up. There was an instance in my kids' school around Thanksgiving where there was a prompt that said Indians and pilgrims. And I emailed and I said, why are we having a prompt in regards to Indians and pilgrims? Indians is not the way to do it. And I specifically said that my family doesn't celebrate Thanksgiving. So I don't understand why we're doing this. And the teacher was incredibly apologetic. She called me. We had a great conversation. She explained what happened, whatever. She said it's never going to happen again, all of these things. And I was like, thank you, thank you. All of that is important. And I knew she would respond that way because she's incredible. But my most important question was how many parents said something? Because all of the parents got the prompt. I said, how many parents said something? And she said, only you. You were the only one. And I'm like, that's so unacceptable. That is so sad that it had to be the brown woman in the class. And there are black and brown kids in my class too, but I'm the closest to indigenous people. Um, and I said, nobody said anything. There are all these white parents too that are allies, and nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. And I'm sure they saw it and thought, oh, this is not good, but they didn't say anything. And it's important to just say something, send a kind email. The teacher and I was very kind and we had a great conversation. She called me. She was like, can I call you right now? She called me. We had a great conversation, but I took the risk knowing that perhaps I'm putting a target on my daughter's back. Mm, uh, you know and I hope that wasn't the case because the teacher is a good I knew the teacher is incredible and she wouldn't, and I know that not everybody has that, but still it's a risk that I chose to take, and their response was great, and I know that the teacher is going to be more cautious in the future, especially around Thanksgiving, and that matters. um I think that that's all that I have for today. This is going to be uploaded. We'll edit it, and this is going to be uploaded as the podcast to close the season. And then at the in a couple of weeks, we'll share the special like off season episode with my children, where I got to ask them some questions, and I kind of want to share everything with you about it because it was so cute, but I won't. And yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for the love that you've been able to offer me in the last month. I will come back. I will take a little bit of a break still. I will be, like I said, sporadically in and out of social media, but not too much. I'm going to be in Colombia for a while. I need to be in Colombia. I need to be home. I think that being home is going to be rather healing for me. And so I'm going to do that. And thank you for hanging out with me. And we will continue to do this work. We will continue to learn together, and we will continue to be able to understand ways in which we can support one another, in which we can stand with marginalized folks, in which we can create a better future, create a better society, better communities for all of our descendants. I learned this from Layla Saad, and I repeat it as often as I can. It is my goal in this world to be a good ancestor. That's it. And to be a good ancestor, we have to fight against oppression. We have to fight against ways in which all of our kids are oppressed and will be oppressed in the future. And that includes white kids. Nobody is safe here. And so let's continue to work toward being the best possible ancestors. Let's get to our deathbeds in many, many years from now and say, gosh, we left the world so much safer than how we found it. The world is a safer place for women. The world is a safer place for people of color. The world is a safer place for queer folks. The world is a safer place for disabled folks, for fat folks, for Jewish folks, for Muslim folks, for everybody that is marginalized in this world. The world is a safer place because we were committed to uprooting supremacy culture from within us and from around us. Um, that's the commitment that I am making. And that's the commitment that I hope every single one of us will make, so that when we are not here, but our children and grandchildren and our descendants are, biological or not, they can be grateful that the work that we did ensures that they can breathe more easily and they can enjoy this part of our existence called the humanity of, life. I don't even know. Thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you have a beautiful summer.